morning, everyone. Today I'm going to visit the village of Woolstone and maybe take a closer look at the church.
The first thing I noticed since leaving the house is how dead the village seems. Countryside is absolutely deathly quiet. There's usually traffic, people walking, people out with their dogs, but it's mid-morning and there's just absolutely nobody else around. And it's got to be down to the heat. We've had a run of days that are 30 plus in the UK. That's actually very unusual. Growing up, summers would never get that hot. But it seems to have become a regular thing that we're going to have these little mini heat waves now in the summer. And it makes life a bit difficult because British people aren't acclimatised to that kind of heat. We're not sort of physically inured to it. And our buildings aren't built with air conditioning in mind. Pretty much every house and public building in the UK is built with the assumption that it's going to need to retain heat. They're going to need to be very heavily insulated, and of course in a heat wave that's a liability. But I think it's the humidity is the thing that really gets you, because as you can see, we've got this low cloud. It's a very humid day. It looks overcast, but it's actually very hot. It's like walking through soup. And on social media there have been a bunch of Americans who've left America and settled in the UK recently for a variety of reasons. And they've been complaining about the heat, which is heartening. It's not me being a wuss. Generally there is this humidity that is debilitating, even from people who grew up in New Mexico and Texas and places like that. They find it a bit much. And it's the reason I haven't been out for a couple of weeks. One of the reasons I started doing these YouTube vids is to make myself go out every week. I did like the idea of being a sort of countryman who would wear his flat cap and go strolling over hill and dale. And I do like that self-image, but once in a while I have to sort of grill myself and say, hang on, you haven't actually been out for a month. You haven't been anywhere, apart from walking to the supermarket. So that was part of the reason I started doing these videos. Just trying to keep a regular schedule and do something creative that would force me to go out and walk and go different places, go and explore. You can't really do it in 30-degree heat. I've never actually had heat stroke. I've come close a couple of times. I've been out too long. Really misjudged the length of time I'd be out in sort of unrelieving sun. So I'm going to play it careful. I'm 55 and a bit portly, so me and sun aren't going to get along very much. You see how still the air is. Normally when you walk across the field like this, when the crops are high, it's like standing on the seashore. You see the waves of wheat reacting to each gust that pass over it. These sort of shimmering ripples. And there's nothing like that today. The air is absolutely still. And sound is travelling a long way. I can hear traffic on the motorway, which is actually several fields away. So you can hear the hum of the cars. And I've also heard the toot of the train. There's a steam train that runs through the village. And for the past couple of weeks it hasn't run at all. If you buy a ticket for that particular steam train, the small print says that in an emergency they may use a little vintage diesel train instead, and they've been doing that simply because the landscape has become so dry. They're worried about setting fire to the fields. The embers from the funnel are going to settle and start a fire. I'm going to stop as I walk around and try and grab some pics of the odd butterfly. We've had a crazy year for butterflies in Gloucestershire. Again, it's something else other people have been noting on social media. It's not just me. I think that's a speckled wood. But this year the hedgerows have been absolutely alive with butterflies and bees. And it could partly be because we had a mild winter, but I think the main reason is that a certain insecticide, I can't remember the name of it, has finally been banned. That one there I think is meadow brown. But yeah, an insecticide that was being blamed for the decline in the bee population and was really damaging the amount of pollinators we had in the UK has finally been banned. People have been campaigning for it to be withdrawn for years. But it's finally happened with very noticeable results this year. The butterflies everywhere. Mostly cabbage whites and red admirals. I'm disinclined to sort of struggle to film those because they're so common. Everybody knows what they look like. But I've started filming some of the other types I see, just trying to learn the names. We're going to cut along Coffin Way as we pass through Gotherington. This is an old corpse road. People would carry the coffin to the graveyard in Bishop's Cleeve. A lot of villages have little lanes like this. And the silence continues. Normally walking through the village you'd hear traffic, a lot of tractors, maybe horses. There's a lot of stables around here. Certainly you'd hear people working on their gardens. A lot of the gardens around here are quite spectacular and people have professional gardeners. But in the heat of the day, nobody seems to be out. A lot of my walks start on this route. Living in the village, I could head in any direction I wanted, any point of the compass. I tend to go north. If I go east, I end up in the fields that form, the hills rather, that form part of the Cotswold Way. But it's just fractionally too popular. There's too many walkers, I find. It feels too urban. I'm interested in the secluded byways, places people aren't really familiar with. One of which is that little field down there. There's a little official route through it, but there's cows there now. I'm going to avoid cattle if I can. I tend not to head into fields of cattle. I mean, cows are wonderfully benign creatures, absolutely lovely, but once in a while you hear of walkers getting injured. They get jostled. I just want to make sure it's not me. This is Turl Brook. It's a little brook at the bottom of Crane Hill. And I passed it a few times lately, and I've been monitoring the water level just to see what the sort of groundwater's doing, and it is running very low. It's fractionally higher than it was, maybe about a centimetre. Because we did have a tiny bit of rain a couple of days ago, but not much. As you can see, it's down to a trickle. And in Bishop's Cleeve itself, we have a stream that runs by a supermarket. And at the moment, it's just a gravel trench. It's completely parched. This time of year, you'd have ducks in it normally. There's just no water for them. I want to slog up Crane Hill. As you can see, that crop field on the left has been harvested. It's the only one around here that has. I don't know how farmers judge it when they feel the field is ready for reaping. I get the impression they're letting a lot of the fields just hang on. They're hoping for the storm weather we've been scheduled. The fields are going to get doused in water, and hopefully the crops will develop just a little bit more before they harvest them. It is one of the pleasures of doing these walks, doing the same routes repeatedly. You could think of it as a negative. It would be better to sort of drive to the Lake District and drive all over Britain and seek out spectacular vistas. But that's not what I do. I just leave the house and walk in the fields around my house and the little hills. And that does involve walking paths like this that I've walked countless times before. And you would think that's boring, but after a while you realise if it's boring, it's just because you're not looking closely enough. When you head out, you get to see how the nuances of how the seasons wear on. It's not just, winter, summer. But as the summer wears on, you can see how the blossom has given way to greenery and a lot of insect life. And we're now entering the stage of summer where the fruits is going to start really developing. There's a lot of fruit trees around here, apples. There's a pear tree at the front of our house that's laden with pears. And these hedgerows and these little sort of conduits, like the one we're walking through here, they're going to be lined with blackberries very soon. And I could just go and pick a ton of blackberries if I chose. Look at that cottage just there. It's absolutely idyllic. As far as I can see, it's actually hemmed in by very high trees. So whoever built it and has maintained it values their privacy, which I can get behind. If I ever win a bunch of money on the lottery, I'm getting a place like that and you'll never hear from me again. Well, walking through Woolstone. This is the village, just this little stretch of lane and these few houses. It's so small there's no amenities like shops or anything. And as you can see, it's absolutely dead. Can't even hear a dog bark. And it is hot, I gotta say, and I'm sweating profusely. One of the things I did, and I'm sure most novice walkers do, is the first time they decide to go for a long hike is they just wear jeans and a shirt, a cotton shirt. And I did that a few times, and it's a bad idea. I looked down my nose at technical hiking clothing made of special materials that were breathable and sweat wicking. It just seemed a bit gimmicky, but once you've been for a walk a couple of times in jeans, you realise actually, no, it's a good idea. And a portly gentleman such as myself struggles to find sizes that fit, which is why all sort of rotund people who like hiking worship at the feet of Columbia Outdoors, the American brand that's available on Amazon, because they do plus sizes, the few outdoor companies that do. Well, a brief restorative thermos of coffee at Woolstone Church. That was the goal of the walk, a very modest sort of goal, just to sit outside on the bench and have a slurp of coffee. I did intend to go inside. I wanted to walk around the interior of the church and give it a survey and explore some of the terminology of churches. I grew up the son of a vicar, so churches and graveyards were my playground. But I haven't actually absorbed much of the terminology of the inside of churches and the sort of architectural layout. And I wanted to talk about that, partly to sort of educate you, mostly to educate myself. But as I was sitting there, an old couple turned up, obviously intent on cleaning the place and getting rid of some old flowers, so I left them to it. I'm far too self-conscious to start filming and talking whilst people are watching. Well, winding on home now. It's only been a walk of 2 or 3 miles, but it's surprisingly tiring. I guess it's the heat. I went for a walk to Stanley Pont Lodge a couple of weeks ago, and again I was tired at the end of that, and I felt not slightly discontent about that, because I'm sort of 55 now, 56, and like I say, a bit rotund, so I'm always monitoring anxiously my ability to do these walks. I'm worried my ability to go on long walks is going to contract, and the distance I can walk is going to shrink, which I imagine it will eventually. But after that trip to Stanley Pont Lodge, I worked it out on a map. It was 10 miles. I have to feel too bad about feeling tired after that. This is slightly different. I'm only walking 2 or 3 miles and I just feel exhausted, like I want to flop on a sofa. But again, I think that's just the effect of the heat. I imagine anybody else who's gone out hiking is going to be feeling very much the same way. Absolutely empty world right now, just me out walking. Which I do prefer. I did live in London for a while, and I did like the bustle and the richness of the humanity around you all the time. But, having grown up as a child in the Cotswolds, I think that's what I'm tuned to. I need the fields and the green and the solitude. And right now I need a cool drink.
Well, I'm off home now, folks. Thanks for tagging along. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.